Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. This week, Aaron Dowdy of alt-country band Fust took an outside path to becoming a songwriter.
I didn't grow up with a community of music. It wasn't like everybody I knew played music. It became clear to me at some point that music was the way that I saw the world.
Egg prices are up, and some folks are talking about raising backyard chickens.
You know what's going into your chickens. And if you know what's going in your chickens, you know what's coming out of your chickens.
And Helvetia, West Virginia's Old World Fasnacht festival continues to grow, in part because of an online video game. Organizers are okay with it.
It is the most weird and amazing and so poignant for the time. When AI and all this technology is becoming a part of who we are, these people are a reflection of where we are in society.
You'll hear these stories and more this week inside Appalachia.
Support provided by the COPD Foundation, presenting health screening events April 7 in Portsmouth and April 8 in Huntington. More information, copdf.co/events.
Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. The last few years have seen a new wave of indie rock music emerging from the Mountain South. It's distinguished by a southern rock sound and lyrics drawn from observations about living in the region. We're talking about acts like Wednesday and MJ Lenderman, and Fust, a group that's based in Durham, North Carolina, with deep Appalachian roots. Fust has a new album. It's called Big Ugly. I recently spoke with Fust singer and songwriter Aaron Dowdy. Aaron Dowdy, thank you so much for coming on Inside Appalachia. Speak with us today.
Thanks, Mason.
Do you consider yourself Appalachian?
Absolutely. I grew up, I feel like, in the heart of Appalachia, and I was actually raised in Bristol, Virginia. Then I lived for a while in Asheville. So just purely based on the location and being fully surrounded by that area, I clearly consider myself to be Appalachian. But what that means is something more. I don't know, what the specific details of that is. That's sort of what I've been tracing, and my writing is, less like a biographical detail and more about the entire feeling and subject of what it means to be from Appalachia. So,
when did you become aware of that term or that concept of Appalachia? Was it something you grew up with, or did you kind of discover it later?
No, I mean, I grew up with that. My dad's family is all from West Virginia, Wyoming County, Pineville, Beckley area. We had family though in Union and Fayetteville, and also Bristol's a great place to be born for music, for the history of music, because I mean, obviously it's the so-called birthplace of country music, if you want to take that version of things. And Clarence Ashley's from there, and Tennessee, Ernie Ford, and that culture is alive and well. I think my parents really loved being from that region, loved being a part of it. I mean, obviously there's complications, but we never shied away from it. We tried to participate in as many cultural things as we could, and I was sort of brought up to know it and to love it.
In reading about Big Ugly, the press release, I guess, about it mentions your connections to the Hatfield family in West Virginia, as well as the groundbreaking Carter family, which of course exploded at the Big Bang of country music in Bristol, Virginia. Was that something you were aware of too? And can you talk a little bit about your interest in your family's links to those famous families?
Yeah, I mean, mostly this comes out of taking a greater interest in family history, as a lot of people do. At a certain point, you want to know where you come from, and also you grow to love your grandparents and their experiences, and you want to know the history of that. And so I started to sort of inquire with my grandmother about her family and where she comes from in West Virginia, and what her experiences were like. And we would take trips together over the past 5-10 years where we would just kind of walk around her areas and hear stories. And these connections sort of came out, going to Matewan and seeing the courthouse steps. And, she would say, and it just would kind of come out in her speech, oh, we were we had family connections to the Hatfields, and and then also talking with family and talking to my dad, who's also done similar work, like asking questions about family and our connection to Maybelle Carter. Those are more than they are strong ties. It's a kind of narrative we tell about ourselves. It's true, but it's also just a kind of a way of feeling tied to the area and what the area's done. And, it's legendary stuff. I mean, the Hatfields and McCoys, obviously, but also the Carters have become the stuff of legends. And there's a long history of what the Carter family opened up and made possible for music. And the fact that I feel myself to be a part of that area and still writing music, I necessarily feel like I'm part of the lineage. Yes, I mean, I think there's a familial tie. There definitely is, but there's also something else, a kind of cultural tie that I feel like I'm a part of and am happy to be a part of.
Yeah, and that feeling definitely translates to the music and the lyrics you write. How did growing up here and all that context you talk about, how does that affect your songwriting?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I didn't grow up with a community of music. It wasn't like everybody I knew played music, or my parents don't play music. But it was so ambiently rich that I knew music, and playing music was a thing that people did. And we have sort of folk and roots festivals in that area, and we would go to them. And it became clear to me at some point that music was the way that I saw the world. I didn't intend it in any way. It wasn't like I took lessons to try to become a great performer. I never really cared about that. It was just that at a certain point I realized I was singing a lot, and I was tending towards instruments, and I was fixated on performers and wanting to go to shows. And I always gravitated towards being a songwriter. That's what I liked the most, was blending melody and instrumentation and lyrics. And I think part of what makes the lyrics specifically Appalachian, or specifically Southern in that way, I had lived in the South for most of my life, and then I moved to New York, and I thought that I was maybe getting away from something, or needed to, just as a different experience, but almost immediately felt something missing. And I was so curious, as I was missing the South, what it was that I was missing. And so I started writing. I started the Fust project specifically on those grounds, as somebody who had grown up in it but had moved away for a bit, to start reconnecting with the South and my region and my upbringing. So the themes being so specifically Southern in that way, and specifically Appalachian, I mean, I think definitely that's true, have to do with me sort of trying to return to and think hard about where I'm from and what's going on there. And yes, there are a lot of issues, but also there's just so much feeling and so much history and so many good people. And I think lyrics having an opportunity to host those contradictions, or try to describe those contradictions, is what drives the project, lyrically at least.
Let's listen to Spangled, the first single from the new album, Big Ugly.
They tore down the hospital out on Route 11. I'm not sure what happened. It seems like repossession, and I'm not one to try to get all the way to heaven, but I can't even visit the last place it was relevant. Now I can't even visit the last room I may have been in it. So give my love to Amy
words to this song grab me right out the gate with "They tore down the hospital." There have been a lot of rural hospital closures in the last decade, so right away this hits. What inspired that line?
Yeah, that line I think, works on so many levels for me. And I like lines that are very complicated. Rural hospital closures is a serious problem. I don't go into the reasoning behind it in the song, whether it's financial losses or low reimbursement rates or whatever it may be, declining populations in rural areas. I mean, it's just a fact that, or some kind of distrust even of medical institutions, and there's so much at play in these closures. And on a personal level, the hospital I was born in was closed down in Bristol, Tennessee, on the Tennessee side. So, that's sort of been a figure in my thoughts since I was a kid, not being able to see the place I was born exactly, but you can kind of see the area that it was, but you can't see the building and you can't visit the room. And that's been a motif that I've thought about for a long time. But when I started writing this song, what I really wanted to get at was trauma in the South, or a certain kind of difficulty that maybe you often end up at the hospital, and the hospital becomes a point of crisis or a transition point in some person's life, and it can mean a lot, and it can have a lot of meaning for somebody, that moment of being saved or whatever, or coming to recognize where you are or what you need. And for that building to have been taken down, I'm starting to imagine all the people who had that experience floating there, in time. But I would also say those lyrics are really interesting because I wanted to, if you take the opening couplet of "They tore down the hospital out on Route 11, I'm not sure what happened. It seems like repossession." I mean, it kind of can be from one angle describing this financial inequality that's behind the closure, but then also it kind of describes the person immediately. I'm not sure what happened. You kind of are losing consciousness a little bit, or something sort of stepping in to get in the way. And repossession, you're repossessed by an old event that happened to you, and something comes over you and you're repossessed by an old memory, and you sort of lose focus. And I like that kind of play on the very personal and the historical, how they collide. And I think that opening couplet really does that.
Big Ugly is a grower. Every time I listen to it, I hear something new, and it's still kind of revealing itself to me. But right away, my favorite song is Mountain Language. I love this connection between mountains and language. And, I spent a few years living away, and whenever I heard a mountain accent, it immediately brought me back home, and I felt like I was in community. Can you share some of what inspired this song?
Yeah. The initial kernel for this song seems really out of field, but it's a play by the playwright Harold Pinter called Mountain Language. And interestingly, it's about the Kurds and the military coup of 1980, when the Kurdish language was officially prohibited in public life and private life. And it's a one-act play about the soldiers, and they're asking questions to the prisoners, but they're not allowed to speak in their own language, but they don't know the language of the captors. So there's this impasse. And it really struck me. I mean, obviously, the Syrian civil war is a big part of what has been a big part of my life. Not exactly, but just as a global event during my lifetime. And that story always stuck with me. But then, of course, coming from Appalachia, my first thought when I think about mountain language is something else. Is about, like you're saying, the real character of Southern personality and regionalism and expressions and what I wanted to write was some kind of blend of those two. Was this idea of what a people who, when someone's stronger than you or is more ideologically coherent or dominant, and you feel like you have to play that part, you have to kind of speak that language, but you still dream in yours in a way that yours has gone underground, but you got this language that is really true to your way of life that maybe doesn't get the opportunity to be worked through, because you have to work these jobs and you have to work these or deal with these kind of cultural setbacks. And it's just this kind of, for me, I wanted to write a song about country utopia, about making it up the mountain again and being with friends and this language, a language that is proportional to life in the South and that feels like it expresses it right and doesn't have to deal with the sort of ways of the world and that kind of community that's not inhibited but actually freed, precisely because, and it's not backwards either. It's precisely what it needs to be, and it's Southern and it's mountain, and it's I like that idea of a kind of utopia that is consisting of things that people might not expect them to exist with. It's not a technological utopia. It's a country or mountain utopia.
Well, Aaron Dowdy, thank you so much for coming on Inside Appalachia to speak with us today.
Thanks for having me, Mason.
Fust's new album is Big Ugly. Coming up, the price of eggs has some people thinking about taking matters into their own hands. You're Inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by Concord University, focusing on students' futures. Classes available at concord.edu/apply.
The average price of eggs nearly doubled over the last year, and the spike is demanding attention. The U.S. Department of Agriculture plans to spend $1 billion to tackle avian flu and restore flocks of laying hens, while the Justice Department is reportedly investigating whether large producers are price gouging. In Pennsylvania, Lancaster County restaurant The Pancake Farm has posted a sign on the door telling customers to expect a $1.50 upcharge for any meal that includes eggs. WITF's Rachel McDevitt talked to folks there about how they felt about egg prices.
Two pastors, Angelo Rodriguez and Wendell Yorkman, are studying the menu in a sunny window booth. Yorkman is thinking about that sign on the front door.
I saw the sign when I came in, and I thought maybe I'll get an eggless meal like pancakes or something. But then I remembered he was paying, so I figured, what the heck, get an extra egg.
Rodriguez has been noticing the prices in the grocery store, too.
Yesterday, as a matter of fact, we went to grab a couple things for my daughter, and I went to go get her a dozen of eggs, and it was $8.75. And I said, you know what, should be all right.
Yorkman says he stocks up when he sees eggs at a good price.
And they limit it to 2 dozen, so you got to get in line and get 2, go out, come back in, 2 more, go back, come back in, 2 more.
At the next booth, Robin Widener says she's been cutting back on going out to breakfast and making eggs at home since prices started going up. Someone actually gave her eggs as a gift recently.
It was kind of a Valentine's Day gift, but they were eggs. So 30 eggs since Valentine's Day has lasted me. We just used to eat probably 2 eggs every other day between my daughter and I, and now we've cut back a lot because of the prices.
Widener says she's training for a half marathon, so eggs had been an important part of her diet. Now she's turning to alternatives like oatmeal.
I'm not going out and spending $7.99 on a dozen eggs, I can guarantee that. I'm a single mom, so absolutely not, no way. And I think that's where these prices really hurt people, is when, especially if you're a single parent with children.
Marshmallow, a robotic rolling cart at the pancake farm, is still carrying many plates of eggs to diners like Nancy Sarley, who hasn't cut back her egg consumption.
If I need eggs, I buy eggs.
Her husband David said it's a matter of priorities.
Listen, I'm just happy I wake up in the morning. I'm not looking at dirt. I'm not worried about the price of eggs. I don't mean to denigrate or dismiss people's concerns about the price of eggs. I understand that. But for us at our stage of life and where we're at, it's not a huge concern for us. No.
It's a weekday morning at the pancake farm, and the front room is mostly full. But owner Javier Camacho says customer traffic is down around 25% because of the rising prices. He says adding the upcharge to egg meals was tough.
Obviously, we don't like to lose customers. We don't like to think that we are using this as an excuse to kind of, get more money. That's not what we do here.
The restaurant uses up to 190 dozen eggs per week, and prices are volatile.
Prices are changing every day. If we place an order today and the dozen is $8.25 a dozen, tomorrow will be $8.75 a dozen.
There are eggs in the pancake batter, but Camacho says he can't add an upcharge to pancakes.
It's just because it's our main thing in here. And even, if we added more money into the pancakes, that will be devastated,
Camacho doesn't know what to blame for the prices. Avian flu, inflation, politics. He just hopes prices come down soon.
That story is from WITF's Rachel McDevitt. The eye-popping cost of eggs has some people thinking about raising their own chickens. Zach Harold brings us the story of one woman who has spent the last decade trying to make that easier in West Virginia.
A few nights ago, I swung by my neighborhood grocery store to pick up some eggs and couldn't quite believe what I saw.
Look, $10.69 for 12. Oh, good news, you can get a half dozen for $4.99.
I was shell-shocked, you might say. And it got me thinking, would it just be cheaper to raise chickens and get my eggs that way? I decided to ask someone who knows.
Are you going to save money if you raise chickens?
No, you will not.
That's John Novak of Novak Farms in Weston. I caught up with him at the recent Winter Blues Farmers Market in Charleston.
So you're going to have the money in the infrastructure, protecting them from the predators, the feed costs, and all that fun stuff. But I'll tell you what, you will have a better product in the end.
Homegrown eggs aren't pasteurized like the store-bought ones. But as long as they're handled safely and the chickens are kept clean and healthy, the resulting eggs taste better and some studies have shown contain more nutrients and minerals. That's exactly why Susan Kasdorf of South Charleston is interested in chickens.
You know what's going into your chickens. And if you know what's going in your chickens, you know what's coming out of your chickens. And you know what's not going to be in those eggs.
But here's the thing about Susan. As much as she loves chickens, she doesn't have any.
As you can see, there's plenty of room. Chicken coop, plans were to put the chicken coop right sort of back there. There's a space near the end there.
Susan really wants chickens, but her city government really doesn't. She applied for a permit over a decade ago and was denied. She tried again in 2023.
So this time, I went down ready. I had a 30-page application.
She got the same answer.
Ms. Kasdorf, if we were going to give anybody a permit, it would be you. So that tells me it wasn't that I was not up to snuff, that I was not qualified, that they didn't feel I would do a good job. They just don't want anybody to have chickens.
Kasdorf ended up taking the city to court. The suit is still working its way through the justice system, but in the meantime, she's trying a different approach. She's working with State Delegate Mike Hornby to get a bill passed that would allow anyone in the state to raise their own backyard chickens.
I think the ability to farm and make your own food is a fundamental right. And it's one of those things that if you can do it and you're not harming anybody, why should we restrict it?
Some municipalities in the state, like Charleston, Wheeling, and Clarksburg, have ordinances that allow residents to keep a small backyard flock. But others have ordinances forbidding all chicken husbandry within city limits. Or they require you to obtain a permit, which, as we know, can be difficult to obtain.
So if this bill is passed, then it means that if you live in the state of West Virginia, you may have up to 6 chickens that are not free-range chickens and no roosters, and the city can't tell you can't do it unless having your birds physically harms your neighbor.
Hornby, a Republican from Berkeley County, enters this food fight with a noteworthy win under his belt. Last year, he successfully sponsored a bill to legalize the sale of raw, unpasteurized milk in the state. Hornby says it's now time to focus on a different part of the dairy aisle.
I mean, we had this issue during COVID, and recently with the bird flu on the West Coast, eggs are hard to find, and now stores are limiting how many you can buy.
He says a world with more backyard chickens is a world where West Virginians have a safer, more robust food system, a world for which we'd all have to thank Susan Kasdorf and her passion for poultry.
I never wanted to be the crazy chicken lady, but here we are.
For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Zach Harold.
The Trump administration has been firing federal workers around the country, including at national parks. WKU Public Radio reporter Derek Parham reports that Kentucky's Mammoth Cave National Park is just one of the sites already feeling the effects of the cuts.
It's raining and late into the winter season at Mammoth Cave National Park. Tourism season is still weeks away, but families are lining up inside the visitor center for regular cave tours.
We gotta walk over there, right?
Park officials will have to do more with less this year, as the proverbial trimming of the fat is underway under President Donald Trump and senior advisor Elon Musk's sweeping order to rescind offers for seasonal employment at national parks.
I was not laid off. I was fired. We were all fired with no concept of ever being able to come back to this job.
That's cave guide Emily Wheat. She says she's one of 20 employees in the park's Interpretation and Visitor Resources Division who lost their jobs. That's not including other park divisions like maintenance, administration, or resource management. She was one of 1,700 employees across the country that received an email on Valentine's Day, ending her probationary employment.
The department determined that you have failed to demonstrate fitness or qualifications for continued employment because your subject matter knowledge, skills, and abilities do not meet the department's current needs.
Wheat is the daughter of a longtime cave guide at the national park and dreamed of following in her dad's footsteps. She's worked at Mammoth Cave in various roles for around 4 years and received a permanent job offer last August. Regular employee assessments say Wheat was the ideal employee, leading cave tours and creating lasting park programs.
I had actually been able to create a Bark Ranger program for our park and held the first Bark Ranger Day. And I know some of my friends had done some awesome stuff too, and 3 of us were let go.
She was just 10 days from the end of her probationary period when she got that email.
These are the people who take care of you essentially on your trips to parks, and they also make sure the toilets are clean and that the visitor centers are open and that hand you your map.
That's Kristen Bringle, the VP of Government Affairs for the National Parks Conservation Association. She's been a liaison between the parks and the federal government for over 20 years and says the sweeping measures put in place by the Trump administration aren't considering the vital roles played by these seasonal employees.
It isn't being done in a thoughtful manner. It's just being done in a blanket way, just getting rid of people, but not really thinking through who you're getting rid of.
The probationary employees who lost their jobs were on top of another 2,000 seasonal employees who had offers rescinded in early February.
This could have dramatic effects on people's visits to the national parks, and in some cases, this could mean that parks don't even have the leadership that they need in order to manage them.
For the longest cave system in the world, that could mean limited tours and park hours and an economic downturn for neighboring communities. According to the National Park Service, Mammoth Cave brought in just under $90 million to communities within 60 miles of the park in 2023. Bringle says that impact is multiplied nationwide.
$55 billion is what the Park Service generated to the United States economy.
Training at Mammoth Cave for things like first aid and park history was set to begin February 24th, but there weren't any employees to train because of the cuts. 3 days later, the National Park Service released a statement saying it now intends to hire seasonal employees. The National Park Service did not respond to a request to interview and did not provide information on how many seasonal offers would be resent. While the Trump administration continues to strip away park resources, dedicated people like Wheat say they'll wait as long as it takes to return to their dream careers.
I'll be back. No question, I'll be back. anything I can do to be able to be there, I'm going to do it because I love my job.
I'm Derek Parham in Bowling Green.
Every April, violets bloom across Appalachia. They add flashes of purple, white, and yellow to the deepening green of the hills. But violets do a lot more than add natural flair. These flowers have long been a key ingredient in herbal remedies. People use them to fight cancer and the common cold. And they make a pretty tasty snack. Folkways reporter Wendy Welch brings us this story.
Brandy McCann is a self-taught herbalist from Blacksburg, Virginia, who considers violets a personal gift. She was born in late April when the flowers typically bloom.
I was born on Earth Day, actually. That's always a very special thing to me when I see the violets blooming every spring around my birthday. I just feel like it's such a gift from Mother Nature.
Brandy honors that gift by using the violets to make presents for friends and family. In her sunny kitchen, with a view of the flowers growing in her yard, she's teaching me to make skin toner.
So here I have a jar full of dried violets, and I harvested them probably a couple weeks ago. I let them air dry on a towel, and you can hear they're kind of crispy, crunchy. Put them in the jar, and then I pour the oil and fill the jar, leaving just a tiny bit of headspace. Put a lid on it. Shake it, give her a good shake about every day. And then at the end of that month to 6 weeks, just strain out the plant material, and then you have this wonderful infused oil.
But Brandy isn't the only one using violets for a fun home project.
Can I do the scoop yet?
Yeah. You want to help Mama?
Nika Frazier studied at the Chestnut School of Herbal Medicine, and she's teaching her daughters herbalism as part of their homeschool curriculum. Today, they're measuring ingredients for violet sugar.
It is purple.
It is purple.
And it smells good.
Learning with violets can be fun, but when they have playtime, Nika's older daughter doesn't like to waste time.
One of her favorite things to do is to know that she can just be walking outside playing, take a break, eat some flowers, and keep going.
Nika learned to love foraging from her grandmother.
She was actually the person who planted that seed in me that you could find nourishment out in nature.
It is a seed Nika delights to see growing in her children as they forage on the family homestead in southeastern Ohio.
I get to take my two daughters out into the woods, and I teach them what I know, and they are so very interested. They light up. They love taking this in, and they retain it, they apply it, they ask questions, and it's just really enjoyable to watch these little budding herbalists run around in the yard every day with their inquisitive minds.
Those minds have retained a great deal of information, even at their tender ages. Nika asked her kids when one might want to forego a violet snack.
What about if we see it growing right beside something like a poison ivy plant?
Then we definitely don't want to pick it because there are oils on the poison ivy, right?
Yeah.
Keeping that caveat in mind, violets are one of the safest flowers for new foragers because they're so easy to identify.
I like that they're gentle, they're easy to find.
Beth Schuler is a veterinarian who studied at Purple Moon Herbs and Studies.
And so safe and easy to use that you can put it in your cocktail or your salad, but at the same time, it's very strong and powerful enough to help cure cancer.
Beth owns Powell Valley Animal Hospital in Big Stone Gap, Virginia. She often uses violets in her practice. Beth says they're a good herb for breast care in dogs and people.
Most of the dogs that we would use violets for are you're dealing with breast cancer, mammary cancer, or mastitis. We would do a combination of oral treatment with a tincture.
Violets are also a great cleanser for infected wounds. Beth's youngest dog, Sirius, is about to get a special treat because she wants the flower power working inside of him.
He recently went out in the snow and got a little cut on his foot, and so he's got some mild lymphatic inflammation up in his axillary lymph node draining from that injured toe from the ice. So, where'd you go, Sirius?
Sirius clearly enjoys the violet toast spread.
Good boy. I don't usually give dogs toast, but it does act as a very nice absorptive sponge for tinctures to go down easily and less mess.
You heard Beth mention lymph. Humans and dogs have multiple lymph nodes. Think of them as internal trash cans trying to keep the garbage away. When we get sick, lymph nodes under our arms sometimes swell up and ache. But lymph nodes have no pump. Violets are excellent at breaking up and dispelling lymph from our bodies. Just another reason to love them, in Dr. Beth's opinion. But also a reason to treat them with respect and not eat too many of them at once.
Violet is very powerful and easy to find, but again, it is not a simple herb.
In other words, don't go eat a bunch of violets or rub them on your dog's feet and expect either one of you to feel better right away. Beth's dog Sirius got a few days of tincture toast.
With herbs, it's not a one dose and done. These are built up in the body with repetitive use. It's not an overnight fix.
Literally safe enough for small children to swallow as a snack, violets can clean wounds, fight cancer, and even spruce up a gin and tonic. Violets are nothing if not versatile. For Inside Appalachia, I'm Wendy Welch.
That story is part of our Folkways reporting project, which covers arts and culture in our region. For more Folkways stories, visit our website, wvpublic.org. Media and arts organization Appalshop is renowned for documenting and preserving Appalachian culture. But the historic flooding that eastern Kentucky experienced in 2022 threatened that mission. Floodwaters breached Appalshop's building in Whitesburg, Kentucky, and drowned the lower floors. Its extensive film and audio archive was damaged by mud and water. Last month, more severe flooding hit the area. Roger May is Appalshop's Director of Artistic Programs. WVPB's Jack Walker spoke with May about how flooding affects the region's arts community.
Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of archives Appalshop hosts and its ties to Appalachia as a region and the regional heritage here?
Sure. Well, our archive is, we believe is the largest repository of Appalachian ephemera in the country and quite possibly the world. That includes film, that includes video, photo negatives, audio recordings, and other types of ephemera. A lot of that material was damaged in the flood of July 2022, when the flood waters off of the North Fork of the Kentucky River reached about 6.5 feet in height inside our vault in the archive at our Whitesburg building. It was a huge blow to our not just our archive, but to the region and to the folks that know what's in that archive and the richness that's contained therein. But we've been able to get that material out to the respective subject matter experts in those fields, and we've been really pleasantly surprised with the results that we've seen from the cleaned and digitized material that we're getting back.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, obviously, this February, both, Kentucky and West Virginia have been affected by some flooding, which has been fatal in certain communities. And just given that we're talking about, flooding today and how it's impacted your work, I was wondering, maybe could you speak a little bit to what the situation's like over in Eastern Kentucky?
In 2022, it was deemed a 1,000-year flood, one that, no one could recall seeing, be as bad as it was. And it was just devastating. And now in February of 2025, we found ourselves in the midst of another 1,000-year flood in fewer than 1,000 days. Seems like the frequency of these kinds of floods are increasing, and the impact of these floods are just horrific every time they happen. There have been a number of deaths in Eastern Kentucky and Southern West Virginia. It's hard. It's, we're often labeled as resilient people, and there's a point at which, resilience it's not a choice. It's, something you have to do, but it's also tiring, to have to be resilient all the time.
You mentioned, obviously, a lot of these materials were damaged during the 2022 flooding incident. What did the restoration process actually look like? You said you found experts who were able to restore certain materials. Can you walk us through just what it takes to restore archives like that?
From a lay perspective, again, I'm not an archivist or a restoration expert, but from my 30,000 foot understanding of it, as soon as those materials are exposed to water or humidity or mud or any of the elements that came through during the flood, they can begin to break down. So the first thing is to suspend the that growth of mold and so forth, and you do that by getting it into a freezer or colder storage. So that's step one. And then the experts in the field have developed methodologies to carefully clean and restore those items, and then they have a digitization process that they go through, and once that's completed, they send those films and audio recordings and footage and so forth back to us on hard drives. So that's a little bit of what that process looks like.
Are you taking any steps, I guess, to prepare for incidents like that in the future? How are you, I guess, grappling with protecting the archival materials you do have?
One of the things that we had to do in 2022 was look for another space. We simply just couldn't be in the building we were in Whitesburg anymore. So we relocated to a temporary office space in Jenkins, which is about 15 miles away from Whitesburg, still in Letcher County. We've moved our materials over there. There's also, our archive, standard practice is geographical separation. So we have multiple copies of hard drives backed up in geographically different locations, so that if something catastrophic like a flood were to happen again, we would have multiple copies of those materials at different locations.
I was curious then, do you think archival work like this that focuses on the entire region of Appalachia plays a role in uniting communities here and making them feel like they are part of a shared history?
I do, and I think it's really important for people to be able to see themselves in the archive, that they see themselves represented and reflected back to themselves in our archive. And that's one of the amazing things about the archive at Apple Shop is, it counters the stereotype of Appalachia just being white and rural. We've got a really broad collection of materials from Cherokee speakers to African American folks, and as an archive we want to continue to build on that and continue to show the diversity in Appalachia.
A word you used early in the conversation that I think really highlights what we've spoken about so far is ephemera. So, materials that maybe aren't necessarily long lasting. And I'm curious, when you face an incident like this that really highlights how ephemeral, for lack of a better word, some of these archival materials that relate to Appalachian heritage really are, how does that change the your motivation to protect these pieces of cultural heritage? Does it add a sense of urgency to the work that you're already doing?
I think it does. And in this time, everything feels urgent. And I think it's important that we, remind ourselves of why we're here in the first place. And, whether it's a flood or another natural disaster, it's important to preserve these materials.
Every year, the town of Helvetia, West Virginia, hosts its annual Fasnacht celebration just before the start of Lent. There's music, dance, masks, and the burning of an effigy of Old Man Winter. Some call it the Mardi Gras of Appalachia. Up until a few years ago, it was mostly a local attraction. That's been changing. WVPB's Randy Yohe visited and brought us this story.
Swing your partner, they'll swing you.
The Helvetia Community Hall was packed with reveling square dancers as Fasnacht 2025 came to a raucous close. Fasnacht is a celebration of winter, the changing seasons, and a pre-Lenten tradition that dates back to 1520 in Switzerland. Helvetia was settled by Swiss immigrants in the 1860s. Fasnacht is German for fasting night, which celebrates a grand feast and a party before a fast. And Helvetia-style square dancing was introduced here in the early 1900s by immigrant loggers who came into the area with the rapidly growing timber industry. Fasnacht's First Lady is Clara Lehman, president of the Helvetia Restoration and Development Organization. Lehman says the hundreds of Fasnacht revelers wearing papier-mâché masks and joining in parades and historic tours help keep these Swiss traditions alive.
We make sure that we support our youth and our families and things like that through making sure buildings that are historic are preserved, but also that these children and community members remember the recipes, the dancing. We wanted to make sure that we continue to hold this tradition to its roots in that it is a party. It's revelry, it's sexy, it's fun.
Archivist Anna Chandler works in the Helvetia Heritage Center, part of the community's historic village. Chandler says the fortitude of the hardscrabble Swiss pioneers who cut Helvetia out of raw forest still remains today.
And I'm a history student, and I firmly believe if you don't study it, learn from the past, you are doomed to repeat it. And we're seeing that in other parts of the world right now. This used to be a much later in the day event. We brought it up into the daytime, in the daylight, so that it's more kid friendly, and you'll see a lot of kids out there in masks, which is awesome because they really enjoy getting to be participating with that.
Young Garrett Bragg is a first-time Fasnachter from Fayetteville who finally made it here.
Well, we've heard about it for years. We're from the area. And it's just a really cool old tradition. It's just reading about it, reading everything here. It's nice to be able to come out. Appalachian heritage is dying out. It's a beautiful thing. It's just something that doesn't exist much anymore, and to preserve it it's nice to be able to do it.
And we have 8 gnomes in the bell tower with hammers, and they do the bells.
Helvetian David Whipp gives the Helvetia Fasnacht tour, which lasts about 3 blocks. He explains that the Get Rid of Winterfest began decades ago in local homes. Then in the 1960s, they went public.
I was trying to figure when I first started coming up here, and we were talking last night, and we used to get together at the house that a WVU professor had here. And I can remember he had a 2-keg tapper in the front room.
You might expect that at the Mardi Gras of Appalachia, there would be a bit of imbibing and game playing, or should I say game reliving. I'm talking about the hundreds of online gamers coming here who play the action role-playing survival game Fallout 76, the Wild Appalachia Fasnacht update. Callie Williams of Florida and Michelle Audette from Michigan are part of a cross-country Fallout 76 gamer group meeting in person for the first time here at Fasnacht.
I love it so far. Yeah, it looks just like it does in game, and it's kind of mind blowing. We have the cheese house and the honey house, and what I was looking forward to most has already happened, and that was spending time with my friends and getting to know them in person. And 2 of us are from Ohio, 1 from Michigan, 1 from Oregon, and 3 from New York.
Michelle Audette, AUDET, Westland, Michigan.
My hometown.
I love it. We all come here to Helvetia to enjoy the festival, wear our masks, and learn about the history of Helvetia, and also enjoy the Fallout experience.
This is a heck of a way to meet a group, isn't it?
Oh, it's amazing. So many different masks, the history of Helvetia. The whole atmosphere is just absolutely awesome. I love it.
Fasnacht First Lady Clara Lehman says the celebratory collision of old Swiss tradition and futuristic gamer AI is an overwhelming blessing for Helvetia.
It is the most weird and amazing and so poignant for the time. when AI and all this technology is becoming a part of who we are, these people are a reflection of where we are in society. But I think it's wonderful. They're very respectful. We have actually some Fallout 76 fans that donate to our community on a monthly basis. And while there has been a burden on us as a community to figure out how to accommodate more people, and they are a part of that factor, it has been a joy for us, and it has let us restore buildings more and actually develop our organization into something that may be more official. And that's a good thing.
After burning a paper-mache old man winter in a big bonfire and square dancing the night away, Fasnachters amble off to the inn or camp or Airbnb or an hour away to an Elkins motel. And the next morning, stepping out of the so-quaint 3-room Beekeeper Inn to head home, you hear just the soothing babble of the Buchanan River. And you think, will we be back to Fasnacht next year? For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Randy Yohe in Helvetia.
Till next time, thanks for joining us as we journey throughout Appalachia. Our theme music is by Matt Jackford. Other music this week was provided by Fust, Noam Pickleney, John Ingram, The Local Honeys, and Paul Loomis. Bill Lynch is our producer. Abby Neff is our associate producer. Our executive producer is Eric Douglas. Kelly Libby is our editor. Our audio mixer is Patrick Stevens. You can find us on Instagram @InAppalachia. You can also send us an email to insideappalachia@wvpublic.org. Visit wvpublic.org/InsideAppalachia to subscribe or stream all of our stories. Or look for Inside Appalachia on your favorite podcast app. Inside Appalachia is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by Concord University, offering 31 bachelor-level degrees and 6 master-level degrees for students of any age. More information at concord.edu.